He was shot late this evening in front of his apartment building in New York City. Apparently, he was killed almost immediately. The man who shot John Lennon walked up to the musician as he was leaving his limousine. According to eyewitnesses, he said, "Mr. Lennon," and then fired at him point blank at least 5 times. Standing by now in New York with more details is ABC's Lynn Scher.
John Lennon was murdered on his way home, just outside the celebrated Manhattan apartment house, the Dakota, where he lived with his wife, Yoko Ono, and a 5-year-old son. Apparently, he stepped out of the limousine and headed through the gates towards the vestibule when a man emerged and fired 7 times. According to police sources, the man had been seen at the apartment house earlier, and later in the evening when Lennon arrived, the man appeared to be rational. He called out Lennon's name, then crouched police style and fired.
The 4 cops pulled John Lennon out and put him into the back of a police car, and he was bleeding from his mouth, and it was a terrible sight.
John Lennon's body was immediately rushed in a police car here to Roosevelt Hospital, just 13 blocks away from his apartment in Upper Manhattan. He was dead on arrival. They tried resuscitation and they tried transfusions, but nothing worked.
How many times?
He had multiple gunshot wounds in his chest, in his left arm, and in his back.
How many shots are we talking about?
There were 7 wounds in his body.
7
Yes.
bullets?
I don't know exactly how many bullets there were. There were 7 wounds.
How extensive was the damage, Doctor?
There was a significant injury of the major vessels inside the chest, which caused a massive amount of blood loss, which probably resulted in his death.
Did he lose consciousness right away, do you
Dr.
think?
Lynn also
I'm
said that
certain
as
that
far
he
as he
was
could
dead
tell,
at the
Lennon
moment
died
that
with the first shot.
shots hit his body.
But that didn't stop a number of Lennon's fans from gathering at the hospital and at his apartment house to pray and to remember. Lynn Scher, ABC News, New York.
John Lennon was shot at a well-known New York apartment building, the Dakota House on West 72nd Street, and ABC's Rita Sands is standing by live at the Dakota now. Rita, what have you been able to learn since the shooting? Rita Sands, can you hear me?
No, you're on.
Rita?
Ted, what we know about the suspect at this time is, first of all, his identity, 25-year-old Mark David Chapman. He comes from Hawaii. Police tell me he's been in the New York area about a week and began to hang around the Dakota apartment over the weekend asking about John Lennon. He apparently ran into him for the first time this evening about 5 o'clock, asking Lennon for his autograph. Lennon gave it to him on the jacket cover of a record. Lennon went off to a recording session, and we are told that Chapman remained at the hotel until Mr. Lennon returned about 11 o'clock this evening. Police officials describe what happened this way. They say that Chapman came up from behind, yelled out Mr. Lennon's name, and emptied a .38 revolver. There were at least 5 shots spent. There were 7 gunshot wounds, 3, considering both entrance and exit wounds. The worst damage came from the chest wounds. Lennon shouted that, "I know I've been shot." He stumbled up several steps into the Dakota and collapsed inside in an office area and was taken immediately to Roosevelt Hospital, where we are told he was dead on arrival. There is very little known about 25-year-old Chapman, only that he's been staying at a local Y for several days and then at another hotel in the last day or two. He has been taken to the 20th Police Precinct, fingerprinted. They're checking for prior arrest records. Also, for any motive, they don't have any yet. They've charged him officially with murder, but the reason for this attack, unknown. Ted?
Thank you, Rita Sands.
This evening, John Lennon arrived at the emergency room at the Roosevelt Hospital. He was dead at the time of his arrival. Numerous resuscitative efforts were made after his arrival in the hospital, including transfusions, surgical procedures, other procedures, but in spite of the effort of many physicians and after many procedures, we were unable to restore the life of Mr. Lennon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Brokaw. This is today, December 9th. I'm here with Jane Pauley, and this entire half hour will be devoted to the murder of John Lennon, ex-Beatle, one of the best-known musicians and most influential people of his time. As you heard Dr. Stephen Lynn at Roosevelt Hospital in New York City say, Lennon was shot and killed at about 11 o'clock last night outside his apartment building. News of the Lennon shooting, of course, spread quickly around the world. NBC News correspondent Stephen Frazier tells what happened last night on Manhattan's West Side.
Witnesses told police Lennon was shot near the door to his apartment building as he and Yoko Ono returned from a recording studio.
I saw John and Yoko get out of the limousine. They walked into the gate, and oh God, let me take your time. And then I heard four or five shots. They were ear shattering. They were ear shattering. I heard Yoko, and I heard a woman screaming. It was Yoko. She was screaming, "Help me!"
Lennon's building is home for many celebrities. Strangers waiting for a glimpse of some resident are not uncommon. The man accused of shooting Lennon dropped his gun afterward and waited for police to arrive. A detective who questioned him at a nearby police station said he is Mark Chapman, a 25-year-old Hawaiian who has been in New York 1 week.
He, Mr. Chapman, has been about the Dakota for the last several days. He was there on Saturday asking about Mr. Lennon. He was there on Sunday asking about Mr. Lennon. And he was there again this afternoon when Mr. Lennon and his wife left for a recording session. He was able to obtain an autograph on an album from Mr. Lennon as he left for the recording studio where he was going. He remained at that location all evening waiting for Mr. Lennon to come back. Sometime shortly before 11 o'clock, John Lennon and his wife arrived back at the Dakota in a limousine. They parked the limousine on the curb right outside the Dakota. There is a driveway into which they might have gone, but on this occasion did not. They got out of the car, out of the limousine, and walked into the archway area of the Dakota. To the right, as you walk in the archway area, is kind of a vestibule, which has a doorway, a glass doorway. This individual, Mr. Chapman, came up behind him and called to him, "Mr. Lennon," as he arrived at that doorway. And then in a combat stance, he emptied the Charter Arms .38 caliber gun that he had with him and shot John Lennon.
At the hospital where Lennon was taken, young people prayed.
He's not dead. John Lennon can't be dead.
Mark Chapman, charged with the murder of John Lennon, will be arraigned later this morning. Stephen Frazier, NBC News, New York.
Good evening. All around the world, John Lennon's fans bowed their heads in silence today.
Yes, they mourned his death in silence and in song. Thousands in New York Central Park, many thousands more across the nation and the world, marking a 10-minute silent vigil at 2 o'clock local time, wherever the Lennon fans happen to be. The silence falling also in Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami, Memphis, Detroit, and other cities. A report now on the Central Park observance from John Henry.
The silence was almost total here in Central Park this afternoon, except for the sound of the helicopters circling above. Every human being, maybe as many as 200,000 who had gathered here to pay silent tribute to John Lennon, did exactly that. There was not even the sound of a dog barking or a baby crying, which frankly was in evidence just before the tribute began. Then at 2 o'clock, the recorded music which had filled Central Park was shut off, and the silent vigil began. The silent vigil, the prayers for John Lennon's soul, as requested by his widow Yoko Ono, ended after 10 minutes, as did simultaneous tributes around the world. I talked with some of those gathered about their thoughts during the silent period.
A little bit of my life died with him today.
I prayed for his soul, as Yoko asked.
He believed in peace, you know, and what can I say? Just look around you, it tells it all.
And I'd like to see, hopefully, maybe gun control could be the result of this so that death won't be totally in vain.
I was also more curious about little ones really knowing who John Lennon was, how much of his impact from the 60s went back like to 8-year-olds and, you know, 9-year-olds, if they still knew who he was.
At the silent period, I thought if he were here, he'd be happy, you know.
In Central Park, John Habrick, News 4 Manhattan.
I think all our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. You know, and I think that's what I sussed when I was 16 and 12 way down the line. But I expressed it differently all through my life. It's the same thing I'm expressing all the time. But now I can put it into that sentence that I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, you know. If anybody can put on paper what our government and the American government, etc., and the Russian, Chinese, what they are actually trying to do, you know, and what they think they're doing, I'd be very pleased to know what they think they're doing. I think they're all insane, you know, but I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. You know, that's what's insane about it.